Hi, my name is Judith Carpenter. Most people just call me Judy. For most of my life, I believed that if you gave your best, if you showed up for family, they'd show up for you. I worked hard, stayed loyal, and told myself love was enough. But nothing prepares you for the moment when you realize the people you trusted most have quietly written you out of the story. It happened on a warm Sunday in late April. I was driving home from a client visit, coffee half finished in the cup holder, when I turned down the street where I grew up. My parents' house stood at the corner, the one with the big oak tree and the porch swing my father hung himself. That house held decades of birthdays, barbecues, and long summer evenings. It was supposed to be home. That's when I saw it. Balloons swaying in the spring breeze, cars lined up along both sides of the street, neighbors carrying gifts through the front door. And there, stretched across the porch rail in bold, shiny letters, was a banner celebrating Rachel, our family's future. Rachel, my younger sister. I slowed the car until I almost stopped in the middle of the street. There were people I'd known all my life, church friends, old neighbors, even cousins, clapping her on the back, hugging her, laughing like it was the happiest day on earth. And me? No call, no text, no invitation. For a second, I thought maybe I'd missed something. Maybe the invite had slipped past me. But in my gut, I knew. This wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. I parked 2 houses down, far enough not to be noticed, and I sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel, watching from a distance like some stranger passing through. The banner fluttered, sunlight glinting off the gold letters spelling Rachel's name. Not our family's future, not the Carpenter family legacy, just her. The lump in my throat tightened, and in that quiet moment, it sank in. I hadn't just been left out of a party. I was being erased. Growing up, I used to believe life had a way of balancing out. My parents weren't wealthy, but they taught us that hard work mattered. I took that lesson to heart. I helped pay bills when times got rough, took extra shifts in college so Mom and Dad wouldn't lose the house. When Rachel went through her divorce, I co-signed her loan to keep her afloat. I thought family remembered those things, but somewhere along the way, my presence turned into background noise. Rachel was always the golden child, bubbly, outgoing, the kind of person people noticed in a room. And me? I was steady, reliable, the one who handled the messy details no one else wanted to touch. At first, I told myself it was fine. That recognition didn't matter as long as we stayed close. But lately, it felt different. Invitations stopped coming. Group photos no longer included me. My name slowly disappeared from the plaques and newsletters tied to the family's small logistics business, the one I'd helped build from the ground up. That Sunday, watching from my car, it all clicked. This wasn't absent-mindedness. It wasn't forgetfulness. It was intentional. I turned off the engine before anyone could spot me. My fingers hovered over my phone, debating whether to text Rachel or my mom. But what would I even say? Hey, thanks for the invite I didn't get? Number. I couldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me beg for a seat at a table I had helped set for years. So instead, I drove away. At home, I pulled down the old plastic bin I kept in my closet, the one filled with keepsakes I hadn't sorted in years. Inside were yellowed report cards, faded ticket stubs, and a friendship bracelet Rachel once made me in the 3rd grade. At the very bottom lay a silver locket engraved with the letter J. My mother had given it to me on my 18th birthday, saying, "As long as you wear this, I'll always see you." I held it in my palm, the chain cool against my skin. Did she mean it back then? Or was it just another pretty phrase that faded once Rachel grew into the role of favorite? I tucked the locket back into its velvet pouch, not ready to decide whether to keep it close or throw it away. That night, while reheating leftover casserole, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in me, maybe curiosity, maybe instinct, told me to answer. "Miss Carpenter?" A man's voice, formal but cautious. "This is Alan Pierce." I was your parents' estate attorney was. I apologize for calling out of the blue, he continued, but I wanted to follow up on some transition paperwork. You never returned your copy. I frowned, casserole forgotten. What paperwork? There was a pause on the line. It was sent a few months ago. Certified mail to your apartment in Garland. I never received anything, I said firmly. Silence stretched, heavy. Then he cleared his throat. Would you have time to meet in person? I think it would be best to review a few things together. The words hit me like a chill. Transition paperwork? Certified mail I never saw? And an attorney who sounded more worried than official. Something wasn't right. The next morning, I went to the post office to ask about my mail history. The clerk typed my information into the computer, then glanced up nervously. Looks like your name was temporarily removed, she said, due to a change of service form. It was signed digitally by Rachel Carpenter. My ears rang. I thanked her quietly, walked back to my car, and sat in stunned silence. My own sister had intercepted my mail. By noon, I was sitting across from Alan Pierce in his downtown office. The blinds were half drawn, the air heavy with the smell of old paper. He slid a stack of documents across the table. These, he said gently, are your parents' most recent trust updates. I scanned the pages, heart pounding. My parents' signatures were there, notarized and official, and so was the line that made my stomach drop. All assets, properties, and shares transferred solely to Rachel Carpenter. Every piece of land, every account, every ounce of legacy. Gone. I looked up at him, my voice barely above a whisper. All of it? He nodded, expression solemn. I thought you'd seen this before. I shook my head. In the older version, was I included? Yes, he said softly. As co-beneficiary. That version is still in our records. Unless it was formally revoked. He stood, walked to his safe, and retrieved a thick envelope sealed with gold. This was meant for you. Dated 6 months before the new documents, my hands trembled as I broke the seal. Inside was a notarized copy of the original trust, naming me as equal co-owner, half of everything, my parents' real signatures clear as day, and a sticky note in Alan's handwriting, for Judy, copy retained. The truth sat in my lap like a weight. Rachel hadn't just intercepted my mail. She had stolen my place in the family, on paper, in memory, and in every way that mattered. I drove home with the envelope resting on the passenger seat like it was made of stone. Every stoplight, every turn, my eyes kept darting toward it, as if it might vanish if I blinked. A notarized trust naming me as co-owner, half of everything, signed by my parents, witnessed, sealed. And yet somehow, I had been erased. That night, I spread the papers across my kitchen table, alongside a yellow legal pad I grabbed from the drawer. My pen scratched out numbers, dates, memories, things I'd buried under the assumption that family loyalty didn't need receipts. Mortgage payments, $78,000 over 6 years. Money I had quietly poured in after the 2008 crash when my parents nearly lost the house. Emergency repairs, the plumbing disaster, the new roof, the surprise property tax bill in 2020, Rachel's mistakes, her DUI attorney fees, the loan I co-signed after her second divorce. Every dollar was meant as a family favor. Now it felt like evidence. Proof that I had invested in a family that was rewriting me out of its story. By midnight, the legal pad was full. My casserole sat untouched in the fridge, and I hadn't even turned on the TV. I felt hollow, like someone had pulled the floor out from under me. The next morning, I drove to the Dallas County Clerk's office, a beige building that smelled faintly of dust and toner. At the records counter, I filled out a form requesting recent property transfers under the Carpenter name. The clerk handed me a folder 10 minutes later. My fingers shook as I flipped through. 3 months ago, the family house had been transferred to Rachel Carpenter. No mention of me, no mention of a trust. Just a clean, one-sided deed. Another transfer showed my father's share in the warehouse lot, our biggest family asset signed over to Rachel. Again, no discussion, no announcement, no room for me. I stared at the signatures. My father's name scrawled in neat cursive at the bottom of the page. At first glance, it looked right, but something gnawed at me. The slant of the J in James, the missing loop in the P of Carpenter. I'd grown up watching him sign checks, permission slips, business invoices. His signature was muscle memory to me. This wasn't it? I snapped a photo with my phone, printed a copy, and slipped it into my bag. On the drive home, my phone buzzed with a text. I glanced down at the screen and my stomach dropped. It was from Rachel. "Don't make this messy, Judy. You were never meant to have it anyway." I pulled the car to the side of the road, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Her words weren't just cruel, they were confirmation. She knew exactly what she had done. That night, I couldn't sleep. I laid in bed with the lamp still on, the trust documents spread out across the covers, Rachel's text glowing on my phone screen. The room felt too small, my thoughts too loud. By dawn, I made a decision. If Rachel wanted me invisible, then I would make myself undeniable. I called Alan Pierce, the attorney, and asked bluntly, "If these signatures are false, what does that mean legally?" He hesitated, then said, "Forgery changes everything. If it can be proven, those deeds are invalid. The older trust could override the newer one." My heart pounded. "So Rachel's transfers could be reversed," he finished, "but you'll need proof." Solid proof. After hanging up, I flipped through my phone contacts until I found a name I hadn't dialed in years. Mr. Ledbetter, my parents' former estate attorney. He'd retired, but I remembered his steady presence, the kind of man who never rushed a word. To my relief, he agreed to see me that afternoon. His home office smelled of old books and lemon polish, sunlight streaming across shelves lined with law journals. He listened carefully as I laid out the deeds, the trust, Rachel's text. His brow furrowed as he studied the signature on the warehouse transfer. "This isn't James' handwriting," he said finally, tapping the page. "I've notarized his name enough times to know. The slant is wrong. The pressure on the loops, too neat. I'd wager your mother signed this, not your father." My stomach lurched. "Mom?" He leaned back, hands folded. "Your father also set up a contingency trust years ago. It activates if there's evidence of fraud or manipulation. If you can prove forgery, that trust could restore your rights." I stared at him. "So I wouldn't just be fighting for half? I could reclaim full legal control?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, but Judy, prepare yourself. This isn't just paperwork. It will mean confronting your family in ways you may not be ready for." I left his house with the folder clutched under my arm, the Texas sun glaring against the windshield as I drove. My mind was spinning. Fraud, contingency trust, full control. Back home, I set up my laptop, scanned every page of every document, and uploaded them into a secure folder labeled Carpenter Archive. Each click felt like loading a bullet into a chamber. I didn't want to go to war, but it was becoming clear I was already in one. That evening, while pouring a cup of tea, my phone buzzed again, this time with a voicemail. My mother's voice filled the speaker, warm but coated in sugar. "Judy, sweetheart, whatever you're digging into, stop. You're too sensitive for this. Let Rachel handle it. Don't ruin the family." I pressed the phone flat against the counter, staring at the kettle's rising steam. Sensitive. That word again. It wasn't kindness. It was dismissal. A way to push me aside while still sounding loving. I whispered to the empty kitchen, "I may be sensitive, but I'm not blind." That weekend blurred into restless chores. Grocery runs, laundry, vacuuming the same spot twice. My body moved, but my mind was elsewhere, piecing together a case, building a wall of evidence brick by brick. By Sunday morning, another message came, this time from Rachel. Mom wants brunch at Stone Cafe. Neutral ground. Let's just talk. Don't bring drama. I stared at it for a long moment, then typed back, I'll be there. Not for peace, not for reconciliation, but to measure the distance between who they thought I was and who I had become. The Stone Cafe sat on the corner of Main and Elm, all glass walls and industrial lights, the kind of place my parents liked to call neutral ground. To me, it felt staged, too polished, too public, the kind of place where appearances mattered more than honesty. When I walked in, I saw them immediately. Mom in her coral blazer, pearls shining just so under the light. Dad sitting stiff in a dark jacket, eyes scanning the menu like he hadn't already decided what to order years ago. And Rachel, my sister, rising from her seat with arms open and a smile painted across her face. "Judy," she chirped, kissing the air beside my cheek. "So glad you came." Her tone was syrupy sweet, but her eyes said something else. "You're on my stage now." I forced a small smile and slid into the seat across from them. The waitress arrived with a tray of mimosas. I declined. My family each raised their glasses anyway, clinking in a hollow toast that didn't include me. For a few minutes, the conversation floated like background noise. The weather, church announcements, a neighbor's new fence. Rachel led every topic, gesturing like a politician at a campaign brunch. Finally, Mom reached across the table, patting my wrist lightly. "Judy, you'll understand someday. We didn't want you burdened with property matters. You've always been more sensitive." That word again, sensitive. I set down my fork carefully. My pulse thudded in my ears, but my voice stayed calm. "I may be sensitive, Mom, but I'm not blind." Rachel's smile faltered, just for a second. Then she leaned in, lowering her voice so only I could hear. "Don't embarrass yourself here. You were never supposed to have any of it." I turned my head, studying her face, the same girl who once tied a friendship bracelet around my wrist in the 3rd grade, now looking at me like I was an intruder. Enough. I reached into my tote bag and pulled out a slim folder. The cafe's chatter dulled around me as I laid the documents flat on the table. "This," I said evenly, "is the original trust. Dated 5 years ago, signed by both parents. It names me as co-beneficiary." Half of everything Mom's hand froze mid-air. Dad's eyes flicked toward the page, then away just as quickly. "And this," I continued, sliding forward another sheet, "is the notarized deed transferring the warehouse to Rachel." Except the signature isn't Dad's. Not really. A handwriting analyst confirmed it. The slant is off, the pressure inconsistent. It was forged. Rachel's face flushed, but she held her composure. "You're bluffing." I shook my head slowly. "Then explain why the notary who filed it is your old college roommate. Or why Dad was in the hospital for a stroke the exact weekend that signature was supposedly witnessed." Silence stretched. Forks clinked faintly at other tables, but at ours no one moved. Dad cleared his throat, a dry sound. "Judy, maybe we can discuss this later." "No," I interrupted, surprising even myself with the steadiness in my voice. "We discuss it now. Because what you've done isn't just favoritism. It's fraud. And I have enough evidence to take this to court tomorrow morning." Rachel's jaw tightened. "You wouldn't dare." I leaned forward, my gaze locked on hers. "Watch me." Mom's voice quivered. "Judy, please. We just thought Rachel could handle things more quietly." I finished the sentence for her. "More compliantly." She flinched, but didn't deny it. The waitress appeared with a tray of omelets, awkwardly placing plates around our frozen table. I pushed mine aside, untouched, and laid a $20 bill on top of the napkin. "This isn't about omelets," I said softly. "This is about erasing me. And I'm done pretending not to see it." I stood, gathering the folder back into my tote. Rachel hissed under her breath, "You're overreacting. No one's trying to take anything from you." I paused, looked back over my shoulder. "Funny," I said. That's exactly what the paperwork says. Then I walked out, not storming, not slamming doors, just steady steps across the tiled floor, each one louder than shouting. Outside, the spring air hit me sharp and clean. My hands trembled, but not from fear, from resolve. For the first time in years, I wasn't begging for recognition. I was demanding respect. Back at home, I spread the documents across my kitchen table again. The original trust, the forged deeds, Rachel's text, Mom's voicemail. Every piece was falling into place, not as memories, but as evidence. I opened my laptop and created a new folder, labeling it Carpenter Case, Active. Inside, I scanned and organized everything, page by page, timestamp by timestamp. Then I added one last document, a draft letter to my attorney of record. It wasn't signed yet, but it was ready. As the cursor blinked on the screen, my phone buzzed. Another voicemail from Mom. I pressed play. "Judy, please don't make a big deal out of this. We've moved on. Just be grateful Rachel is willing to manage things." Her voice was soft, almost pleading, but I recognized the undertone. Control dressed up as concern. I set the phone down. My reflection in the dark laptop screen looked tired, but not broken. For years, I had been the quiet one, the steady one, the background figure who believed loyalty would eventually be rewarded. But loyalty without respect is just servitude, and I was done serving. That night, I ironed my blouse until every crease disappeared. I organized the folder into perfect order, each page a weapon sharpened with truth. Tomorrow wouldn't just be another day. It would be the start of a battle my family never expected me to fight. And for the first time, I didn't feel like the invisible daughter anymore. I felt like the one holding the pen to rewrite the story. The courthouse wasn't grand, no sweeping staircases or polished mahogany panels like in the movies, just beige walls, fluorescent lights, and a faint smell of stale coffee drifting from the vending machines in the hall. Still, as I pushed open the glass doors with my case file clutched to my chest, it felt like walking into a battlefield. Mom and Dad were already seated in the front row, dressed in muted colors that whispered, "We're just confused parents." Rachel sat between them, shoulders squared, hair pulled into a sharp bun, a gray blazer that looked more boardroom than courtroom. She gave me a smirk when our eyes met, but it didn't reach her eyes. I took my seat beside my attorney, Miss Karen Lowell, a woman with calm steel in her eyes and a stack of neatly tabbed folders in front of her. She leaned toward me, whispered, "Stay steady. We'll let the facts do the work." The bailiff called the session to order. When the judge walked in, even Rachel straightened, her smirk fading to something tighter. After the formalities, the judge looked at Karen. "You may proceed with your opening summary." Karen stood smooth as water. "Your Honor, today we present evidence that the recent property transfers made in favor of Rachel Carpenter were conducted through fraud, forgery, and deliberate exclusion of my client, Judith Carpenter. We will show that my client was not only entitled under the original trust, but actively defrauded by falsified documents, intercepted mail, and a manipulated notary process." Her words were sharp, precise, like scalpels cutting away the lies. Rachel's lawyer, a slick man in a navy suit, rose with his rebuttal. "Your Honor, this is nothing but a misunderstanding between siblings. The parents exercised their right to allocate assets as they saw fit. Miss Carpenter," he gestured toward me, "is simply unhappy with the outcome." I bit the inside of my cheek, forcing myself to stay calm. Karen gave me a subtle nod. It was time. She rose again. "Before we dive into paperwork, we'd like to play an audio recording. Obtained legally, time-stamped, and verified by a third party." The bailiff pressed a button, and the courtroom filled with muffled voices, my family's voices. Rachel's laughter, Mom chiming in, Dad's quieter tone. "Don't worry, Judy won't check. She just wants to be loved." The words landed heavy in the room, like stones dropped in still water. For a moment, no one moved. Even the judge leaned forward slightly, hands folded. "This recording has been authenticated," Karen said evenly. "It demonstrates intent." They weren't just reallocating assets, they were conspiring to erase my client from the family legacy. Rachel shot to her feet. "That's taken out of context." "Sit down, Miss Carpenter," the judge snapped. "This court does not tolerate grandstanding." Rachel sank back down, her face pale but her jaw clenched tight. Karen stepped forward again, sliding a document across the clerk's table. "Next, Your Honor, we present the warehouse deed, the signature allegedly belonging to James Carpenter." The judge examined it, then glanced at the handwriting analyst's report attached. "This says the signature is highly unlikely to match prior verified samples." "That's correct," Karen confirmed. "And the notary who filed it, one Monica Varel, just happens to be Rachel Carpenter's college roommate. Conflict of interest and evidence of coordinated fraud." I watched Rachel's knuckles whiten as she gripped the table. "And finally," Karen said, her voice firm but calm, "we present the original trust. Dated 5 years ago, signed by both parents, naming Judith Carpenter as co-beneficiary. The judge took his time with that one, flipping each page, tracing the notary's seal with his finger. The silence stretched long enough for me to hear my own heartbeat. At last, he looked over his glasses. "Miss Carpenter," he said, turning to me. "Judith. This document contains a clause granting you veto power over any asset transfers before your 40th birthday. How old are you now?" 39, Your Honor. "My birthday is in 3 weeks." A low murmur rippled through the courtroom. The judge tapped the papers lightly. "Then until that date, no transfers can be finalized without your explicit consent. Effective immediately, this court places a freeze on all Carpenter family assets pending full review. An investigation into potential fraud will proceed." Rachel's mouth fell open. "You can't be serious," she shouted, then immediately regretted it as the judge's eyes snapped toward her. "Miss Carpenter," he said coldly, "sit down before I hold you in contempt." Mom reached for Rachel's arm, whispering urgently, but Rachel pulled away, glaring at me like I'd stolen the crown off her head. I didn't flinch. Karen placed a hand on my arm, subtle reassurance. We'd done it. Still, part of me ached. Not from losing the case, that wasn't the point, but from the sight of my parents sitting stiff and silent, not once looking in my direction. Even when the judge read out their signatures, even when the lies unraveled, they never turned to me. That hurt more than any forged document. When the session adjourned, I stood slowly gathering my folder. The weight of it felt different now. Not a burden, but a shield. As I walked toward the exit, I passed by their row. Mom's lips parted, maybe to plead, maybe to manipulate one last time. "Judy, please." I stopped, not turning, my voice steady. "This isn't revenge. It's restoration." And then I walked out. Not storming, not running, just walking, heels clicking against the tile, each step echoing louder than their silence. Outside, the Texas sun was sharp and unforgiving, but for the first time in months, I breathed freely. The courthouse doors shut behind me with a dull thud, sealing in the lies I'd just dragged into the light. Ahead of me, the path was still uncertain. Legal battles don't end in a day. But I knew one thing. I wasn't invisible anymore. Not to the law, not to myself. And no banner, no forged signature, no whispered "she's too sensitive" could ever erase me again. The courthouse faded in my rearview mirror as I drove north, away from the noise of legal filings and family battles. My tote bag sat on the passenger seat, the folder inside no longer a weapon, but a marker of survival. I wasn't headed back to my apartment. My car seemed to steer itself toward Cedar Ridge, the little town where my grandfather's house still stood. When I pulled into the gravel driveway, the magnolia tree out front leaned the same way it always had, bowing slightly toward the sidewalk. The paint on the porch rails had faded, but the house itself felt sturdy, steady. like it had been waiting. I stepped out, my heels crunching against the stones, and let myself in with the old brass key I hadn't used in years. The door creaked open to the faint scent of cedar, the same scent that used to cling to my grandfather's flannel shirts. Inside, the air was still, almost reverent, not empty, full of memory. I dropped my bag by the entry table and walked through each room slowly, like tracing back steps I'd once rushed past as a child. The bookshelf still held his gardening magazines. The window above the sink still framed the yard where he grew tomatoes every summer. Even after all this time, the house hadn't forgotten me. Even when my family tried to erase me, this place whispered, "You were always here." I wandered upstairs into his study, now bare except for a desk and the faint outline where his favorite chair had once stood. On the mantel, I placed something small I had carried in my wallet for years, a folded paper crane he'd taught me to make when I was a teenager. He had tucked it into his wallet once, telling me, "You're the one with wings, Judy." Don't ever forget that I smiled faintly. Maybe I had forgotten, but not anymore. That evening, a knock startled me out of my thoughts. I opened the door to find Mrs. Alden, the neighbor from 2 houses down, holding a weathered envelope. "Found this in the old church mailbox," she said, adjusting her scarf against the breeze. "It's addressed to you." Looks old. Her hand trembled slightly as she passed it to me. I thanked her, closed the door, and sat in the creaky armchair in the living room. My fingers recognized the handwriting before I even opened it. My grandfather's. The letter was dated just 5 days before he passed. His words spilled across the page in careful loops. "Judy, if you're reading this, the winds must have shifted." I feared they might. People forget what's fair when fear gets involved. But I've always known your heart. It's why I chose you, because you'd protect, not possess. Speak softly, but stand when it matters. Justice takes time, but it always finds its way. Love always, Papa tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, but they didn't fall. It wasn't grief exactly. It was release, a weight lifting. I folded the letter back slowly and tucked it against my chest like a keepsake. Later that night, my phone buzzed with another voicemail from Mom. Her voice sounded smaller than I remembered. "Judy, we didn't realize how much you meant until you walked away. Maybe we didn't want to. I don't expect you to forgive us. I just hope you're okay." For the first time, I didn't feel anger. Not pity either, just a long, hollow breath. Some doors don't need to be slammed shut. They just stay closed. I set the phone face down on the table. The next morning, I opened the curtains wide and let the light flood the house. I spent hours moving through the rooms, cleaning here, rearranging there. Not because the house needed it, but because I needed it. Each sweep of the broom, each folded blanket felt like reclaiming a part of myself that had been left in shadows too long. In the kitchen, I stood by the window where my grandfather once hummed while rinsing tomatoes. Sunlight warmed my face. For the first time in years, I felt still, not restless, not invisible, just still. And in that stillness, peace. Down the street, I heard the laughter of children running past the gate. A little girl, maybe 10, chased after a paper bird twirling in the breeze. I smiled. I wasn't chasing anymore. Not approval, not love that had conditions, not recognition from people who couldn't see me. They had given away the estate thinking I was dispensable. But I had always been the foundation, the steady one, the quiet one, the one who knew what was worth keeping and what needed to be let go. And now, finally, I was choosing to keep myself. As the sun dipped low, I locked the front door behind me and paused on the porch. No grand speeches, no final announcements, just the evening light spilling across the yard and a life waiting to begin. Sometimes you don't need to slam the door. Sometimes not returning is loud enough. Sometimes standing up for yourself doesn't mean shouting. It means walking away with your dignity intact. This wasn't about revenge. It was about restoration. Family may share blood, but true family is built on respect. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't asking for theirs. I was standing firm in my own. This story wasn't about property or money. It was about dignity. Judy realized that no signature, no piece of paper, could ever erase her true worth. She stood firm, and in doing so, she reclaimed respect and peace. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, remember this: your value isn't decided by others, but by the way you choose to stand tall. Sometimes the strongest act is walking away with your head held high. Choose yourself. You deserve it. Thank you for watching. If this story spoke to your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. And always remember, your love, your truth, your place are worth defending.